When Jennifer Aniston spoke about adoption in a recent podcast interview, a single line, "I didn't want to adopt. I wanted my own DNA in a child," was enough to reopen one of Hollywood's longest-running conversations. It sounded like a private confession, a reflection on personal choices and unfulfilled dreams. But in the world of celebrity, where every sentence carries history, those words echoed far beyond their moment. Within hours, the remark had reignited the memory of the relationship that once defined an era. Jennifer Aniston, Brad Pitt, and Angelina Jolie. The reaction was instant and divided. Some saw honesty, others saw intent. To many, the statement felt like a quiet reminder of a past wound that never truly closed. For others, it was simply a woman clarifying what she had always wanted. The truth likely sits somewhere in between. What matters is not whether Aniston meant to provoke, but why a few words spoken in 2025 can still set off waves of analysis about a story that began 2 decades ago. The roots of that story stretch back to the early 2000s, when Aniston and Pitt were the ultimate Hollywood couple, their marriage the image of balance between glamour and relatability. When it ended and Pitt's next chapter began with Angelina Jolie, the world cast the breakup as a morality tale. Jolie, who had already adopted a child from Cambodia and would later expand her family through both adoption and birth, was seen as representing a new ideal of global motherhood. Aniston became her contrast, the career-focused woman without children, the one who, in tabloid shorthand, was left behind. The simplicity of that narrative made it powerful, but it also made it cruel. In the years that followed, Aniston's life became a kind of public referendum on motherhood. Every photograph, every headline, every rumor of pregnancy was treated as evidence of fulfillment or failure. What she revealed later changed the understanding completely. After years of silence, she spoke openly about her attempts to conceive through IVF, about the effort, the exhaustion, and the grief of trying and not succeeding. It was a confession that stripped away years of speculation. She had not chosen childlessness out of indifference. She had lived it through struggle. That context makes her recent remark more complex than it first appeared. When she says she never wanted to adopt, it can sound dismissive. But for someone who spent years fighting for a biological connection, it reads more like a quiet admission of what she once hoped for. A child that shared her blood, her features, her story. It is not a rejection of adoption. It is an acknowledgement of loss. In another world, it would have been received with empathy. But in the digital age, nuance disappears quickly, and context becomes optional. Once again, old narratives rush to fill the gap. Online commentary framed the statement as a subtle reference to Brad Pitt, whose family with Jolie was built around both adoption and biology. Memes, timelines, and comparisons resurfaced overnight. In the noise, the essential meaning was lost. That Aniston's story is no longer about the man she married, but about the woman she became after she stopped being defined by him. Still, the resonance is undeniable. Pitt remains the quiet center of a story he no longer tells. Jolie remains the image of chosen motherhood, the woman who turned family into advocacy. And Aniston, after years of silence, now speaks for herself. Together, they represent a generational portrait of how fame, gender, and identity intersect. Their triangle was never just about romance. It was about the public imagination's need to divide women into types, to decide who wins and who loses. The fascination endures partly because each of them came to embody a cultural idea. Jolie became the global humanitarian, the woman who built a family across borders. Pitt evolved into the introspective artist, reflective and reserved. Aniston became the symbol of resilience, the woman who carried herself through humiliation with humor and grace. These roles were written for them by the media, but they also helped maintain them, each in their own way, because Hollywood rewards coherence. A brand survives better than a person. Aniston's remark disrupts that coherence. It reminds people that the woman who once represented composure and optimism also carries her own version of disappointment. It reclaims complexity in a system that prefers simplicity. The sentence, stripped of scandal, is simply human. A person saying she wanted something that did not happen, and that she accepts that truth without apology. In the public sphere, however, motherhood remains a field of moral judgment. Society celebrates choice in theory, but still measures women by the outcomes of those choices. Adoption, fertility, or remaining child-free, each path carries invisible expectations. For Aniston, The scrutiny was relentless because she symbolized a generation of women balancing independence with the traditional expectations of family. For Jolie, the scrutiny came from another direction: accusations of performative compassion and questions about power in international adoption. Both faced criticism that mirrored the cultural unease around female autonomy. The conversation their lives represent extends beyond celebrity. It reflects the tension between privacy and performance in modern womanhood, the demand to live authentically while being watched. Aniston's candor challenges the assumption that silence is grace. Jolie's restraint challenges the notion that visibility is validation. Together, they show two different responses to the same pressure: to control a narrative that was never theirs to begin with. Time has softened the public tone, but the fascination persists. The internet, unlike print tabloids, never forgets. Clips from old interviews resurface, recontextualized by younger audiences who see the 2000s gossip wars as part of a larger story about sexism and media control. What was once scandal is now seen as evidence of how the culture treated women under scrutiny. The re-examination is, in its own way, an act of correction. Jennifer Aniston's comment fits into this new cycle of reflection. It is both personal and historical, a reminder of how deeply narratives can embed themselves and how hard it is to escape them. Her words do not reopen a feud. They expose the fact that the feud never truly belonged to the people involved. It belonged to the audience, to the machinery that turns human lives into symbols. Brad Pitt, too, remains part of that machinery, though largely silent. His later years have been marked by self-restraint, by an effort to separate the man from the myth. Yet he remains the gravitational center of a triangle that continues to turn, even when none of its corners move. Every new comment, every perceived reference brings him back into orbit. It is less a story about love than about memory, how fame freezes time and how the public resists letting it thaw. Behind all this is a simpler truth. Jennifer Aniston is not the 36-year-old actress standing in the wreckage of a marriage. She is a 56-year-old woman reflecting on a life that unfolded differently from what she imagined. Her honesty is not provocation, but closure. She has spent years explaining, defending, and redefining herself. What she offers now is not an explanation at all, but an end to explaining. The power of her remark lies precisely in its refusal to perform virtue. It is neither sentimental nor political. It doesn't apologize for wanting what she wanted. It doesn't apologize for not wanting what others think she should. In a culture that still asks women to justify their paths, that kind of directness sounds almost revolutionary. It is easy to see why the story refuses to fade. The names, Aniston, Pitt, Jolie, belong to an era when celebrity felt mythic, when fame still carried the illusion of permanence. But the people behind them have changed, and so has the world around them. The love triangle that once defined them now functions as a lens through which society studies itself. What began as gossip has become a lesson in narrative, gender, and the cost of visibility. Aniston's statement about adoption will not end the conversation. It was never meant to, but it adds one final piece to a puzzle that has been misassembled for years. It turns what was once a scandal into a story about ownership, the right to tell one's truth without translation. The noise will fade as it always does, but what remains is the image of a woman who, after 2 decades of being spoken for, finally speaks with precision and peace. In the end, her words are not about Brad Pitt or Angelina Jolie. They are about the long journey from being defined by others to defining oneself. They are about the quiet courage it takes to speak plainly in a culture that profits from distortion. And perhaps that is why the world keeps listening. Not because of the past she represents, but because of the clarity she finally allows it to see.